Hello and welcome to Guides.Global. My name's John Howell and I'm the editor. With me I have Başak Yıldız Orkun, who is a lawyer based here in Bodrum in Turkey. Başak, thank you for coming.
Hi, John.
Now in this video we're going to talk about wills. We're going to talk about why people should make a will, what they should put in it, making a will here in Turkey and making a will back in their own country. We have done a separate video about how to deal with an inheritance, in other words, what happens after somebody's died. So if that's of interest, it'll be there on www.guides.global. Why should people make a will?
I think will make it easier to distribute your assets according to your own will. And also it will make the procedure much easier, because if you don't have a will, obviously the application will be according to your home country code of like a civil law. So the will, I believe, make it easier before the courts and procedures, before the department, how you distribute your assets. And I think it will just make the procedure more smooth.
So as far as you're concerned as the lawyer here in Turkey, if someone has a will, whether it's a will in their own country or a will here in Turkey, just makes your job easier, quicker, and therefore I imagine cheaper.
Exactly, and also if you just rely on the like a general rules, which may cause like a partnership between the legal heirs, and sometimes it is not something we really looking for, because they may have a dispute and it may cause a lot like a complexity in the future.
So yes, if the law says, okay, there's no will, so this house is going to belong equally to your three children, if they have a dispute, and it does happen, then the end result can be that the house has to be sold, and worse still, sold at a public auction.
That's true.
And a public auction here in Turkey will usually mean that you'll only get half of the value of the property.
If you're lucky, because you might think that the market value is higher, but unfortunately you have to rely on the value which is defined by the experts of the courts. So they may value it lower than your expectation, and the public auction will start from 50%. So
So all in all, from the purely practical point of view, making a will is a good thing.
Good thing, yeah.
And of course the other thing about it is it allows you to leave your property to whoever you want, rather than in the way that the law specifies.
Yeah, I think that's the whole gist,
yes,
really.
That's why we have wills.
Yeah.
So let's just be clear. In Turkey, the rule is that if you're dealing with the will of a foreigner, then you do not apply the rules that govern Turkish people when it comes to who has to inherit what. You apply the rules that apply in that foreigner's own country.
That is true. According to our Code of International Private Affairs, the person is bound up with their home country codes of like inheritance. The only thing is we need to just follow up the procedure as per Turkish law, because if the assets is based in Turkey, we need to get the necessary paperwork for
of course,
transfer.
And the procedure has been what we've dealt with in our inheritance video, which people should be looking at if that's of interest to them. So if I am an English person and English law allows me to leave my will basically to my property basically to whoever I want, then the Turkish will respect that will.
Correct.
If I'm a French person or a Spanish person where there are certain restrictions on who I can leave property to, the law in Turkey will respect their will, provided it complies with the restrictions in their own country. Good.
Correct.
Okay, so that's why you should make a will. What should we put in the will? Now, of course, that varies completely from person to person. But people do need to understand, don't they, that by putting the right things in the will, they can save a huge amount of tax and a huge amount of inconvenience.
Yeah, because the inheritance tax is applying in, I think, almost all countries.
Yes.
So by distribution, you can at least minimize the taxation.
Yes, and if, as is usually the case, or often the case, you have a person in Turkey who perhaps has a holiday home here, so they have a house in Turkey, they may have a car in Turkey, they'll probably have a bank account in Turkey. Really, the will, as far as the Turkish authorities are concerned, only needs to deal with those three things.
Yeah.
And if you start dealing with things all over the world, it's just going to make it much more complicated.
Obviously, the Turkish authorities will be just interested in the Turkish side of that will, so
Yes.
we will not be interfering in any other affairs of any other country. It's not going to be considered. But I think we face like a couple of different type of wills. Some type of the wills, the people are just saying all my assets are going to this
Yes.
person.
Simple.
So that's simple. In some assets, they are saying my assets in like a Barcelona is going to someone, in Bodrum is going to someone. Then there is some identification. So as far as I like a concern, the only thing, it has to be clear.
Yes.
So your like intention has to be clearly defined in your will, and the other party should understand that.
Especially in relation to the assets located here in
Exactly.
Turkey. And if you make a will, and you know, some people do a will that goes on for 30 or 40 pages, and it says, I give my yellow jewellery to so-and-so, and I give my picture of Lenin to somebody else, and I give my toy train set to somebody else, and and then they give things to charity, and they make lots and lots of arrangements. Of course, that will has to be translated, which is expensive. It has to be understood by the authorities here in Turkey,
Correct.
which is expensive, and the whole operation becomes more complicated, more expensive.
Yeah, and don't forget, even it's not Turkish law, we are still checking your home country law.
Yes.
So it has to be complying with your like a home country code of inheritance.
Yes.
So
Now, and this becomes, I think, particularly important if you are in a complicated relationship. So, for example, if you're in a same-sex relationship, or if you're married for the second or third or fourth or fifth time and you have children by each of those marriages, in those circumstances, being very clear in your will about exactly who you want to inherit is really important.
Really important. Who you leave the asset, defining that person, giving all the details is very important. And also, I just want to make a comment about the details of the assets in here, because sometimes we are facing that people are putting the exact details of the assets, but sometimes they are not correct.
Yes.
So then it is just a disaster to us.
Yes.
So the will
Absolutely.
be completely invalid. And it happens in Turkey a lot. If I should give an example, people are purchasing a property in Milas, which is pretty known part of Bodrum, but it is originally not. It's a different town from Bodrum. So when their estate agents selling their property, you are buying a property in Bodrum, but the legal registration is basically Milas.
Yes.
So if you go to your like a will saying that a property in Bodrum that I'm leaving to my sister, so basically it's not a property in Bodrum.
Right.
So
And that means that as far as that property is concerned, there is a gap in the will. There is no effective gift of the property in
Not at
Bodrum.
all.
And then the law will fall back on saying, well, what is the general rule in your
Exactly.
country? So it could all go to your children in equal shares, for example.
Exactly. So we usually advise our clients not to put like too many details. Like a property in Turkey is absolutely fine.
I can remember somebody in a will who said, I leave my Ferrari to my grandson. And by the time he died, he'd sold the Ferrari and bought a Porsche. So exactly, completely ineffective.
Completely.
So make it general, not specific.
Yeah, the
Good
name
tip.
of the banks could change because most of the Turkish banks now are like purchased by the non-nationals.
Yes,
So just make it more general and clear.
I leave the money in my bank account to this person. I leave my car to this person. I leave my house in Turkey to this person.
Exactly.
Yes, good tip.